Hi there, you're listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. My name is Matt Wakeling and this is the show I produce in Sydney, Australia, where I speak to leading guitarists and guitar figures from all around the world. Thank you so much for joining me for episode number 107. Now today I speak to New York guitar luthier Rick Kelly. For over 50 years, Rick has been handcrafting guitars in New York City. Some of Rick's customers include Bob Dylan, Bill Frisell and Lou Reed, and we speak about those artists and much more. Now recently Rick's work has been documented in a fantastic film called Carmine Street Guitars, which is the name of Rick's shop, and the film was created by filmmaker Ron Mann. Now not only does the film feature some fantastic guitar performances as people like Charlie Sexton, Kirk Douglas, Mark Rebo, Bill Frisell and more all rock up to Rick's shop and have a play and a chat. It really documents a real sense of community in a neighbourhood that has become increasingly gentrified. Rick continues to build these guitars by hand, and there's a wonderful relationship between Rick, his mum, who still works in the shop and looks after the books, and his apprentice Cindy Hulej, who also does some incredible work. It's a beautiful documentary. There are links to the trailer in our show notes, but right now let's jump over to my interview with Rick Kelly. I began by asking him when he started building guitars. When did you start building guitars, and were you a guitar player first, or were you just interested in the building?
Actually, I kind of played music a bit in high school and actually started making guitars. Actually, I just celebrated 50 years of guitar making. So
wow,
first
fantastic.
one I made was in high school, actually, in 1968. And I've just been doing nothing ever since. I've just always been a guitar maker, and that's, what I do.
Fantastic. Do you remember that first guitar?
Well, yeah, the first one actually in high school was just like a ukulele cigar box. Ukulele was an art project, an art class, but I actually started in about 1970 making Appalachian dulcimers and acoustic instruments first, and then I moved to solid bodies by about 1970, 71.
Okay, great. And are you still making acoustics? The film really focuses on your solid bodies, but do you still build acoustic guitars?
Not too much. No, acoustics, I can only do them here in the winter months when it's very dry. It's way too humid during the summer.
Okay.
And you have to have a climate controlled environment to build them. So I used to build like one a year in the winter months, but I have so many orders now for solid bodies, I just don't get a chance anymore to do acoustics.
Yeah, sure. So 1970, 71, you're building electrics. Who were your first clients, and what were the first guitars you were commercially building? Well, I had a shop around the corner in the mid-'70s. It was on Downing Street, and I got to meet David Bowie and John Belushi and Lou Reed, and I started making instruments way back then. But, this shop's been here now 30 years, where the shop I've been in now, and just about everybody I've made for here and get to know a lot of musicians. Fantastic. So when you say where you are now, that's obviously the Carmine Street Guitars location.
Yeah, we're on 42 Carmine Street, and Carmine Street's a small block that goes kind of between 6th Avenue and 7th Avenue, and it's down in the Greenwich Village area where all the streets are kind of not part of the grid. In New York City, there's a grid where everything runs parallel up and down. But down here, it's the old part of the city where everything's kind of on an angle. So it's one of those little angled streets between 6th and 7th Avenue. From
what I understand, Greenwich Village obviously has an amazing musical history, but it's become quite gentrified in the last, 20, 30 years. You seem to have resisted that and kept the same vibe in your shop there.
Yeah, this area is changing all the time. It's always kind of been the way. New York City always goes through changes. But this is an old Italian neighborhood, and before that it was an Irish neighborhood. A lot of the streets, Sullivan Street and Thompson Street are all Irish names. But now we're on Carmine Street, where the Italians moved in, I guess, in the 1800s. So this is an old building, an 1827 building that we're in, and it's mostly an Italian neighborhood down here. But yeah, the Greenwich Village area has been through a lot of changes, and most of them positive, I would think.
Yeah. Is there still a sense of community that you're familiar with in that area where you are?
Yeah, this store is kind of that way. We sometimes, like Ron refers to it as a post office, because somebody will leave something here for Jim Jarmusch or somebody, because they know they come in here. But I sort of accept stuff, people messages as well as books and whatever people leave by for somebody else. Yeah, it kind of has that same old community vibe to the area, and the neighborhood is still that much.
Oh, I love that. That's great. There's a scene in the movie when you're riding your bike to work, so I assume you live nearby.
Yeah, I live within walking distance or a bike ride away. I'm over in a neighborhood called Soho, and that's an old neighborhood as well. It's an old cast iron area. Used to be mostly factories, and then a lot of the artists moved in there in the 1950s and 60s and made lofts out of the old factory buildings, and most of the industry moved out of the city. There's almost no industry here anymore. And so it's now gone from that to being like Rodeo Drive, all the Dolce & Gabbana and Chanel and stores like that have moved into that neighborhood. I do live over there, so I see that it's mostly on the block every weekend. It's just mostly Europeans visiting, lots of tourists, but it's got its own charm with the old cast iron. I love the cobblestone streets, and it's like the way it was. It's historic now, so they're not allowed to really change any of the architecture.
Okay. You mentioned in the movie, I think if I heard right, growing up on Long Island. Is that correct?
Yes, I grew up. I was born in Jamaica in Queens, which is New York City limits, and then Mom and Dad moved out to the southern part of the island about 1955, and I went to school out there, and I used to come into the village in the 1960s and see Jimi Hendrix and the Chambers Brothers and different acts back in the early 60s. I used to come in on the train and got to visit the neighborhood. It was really kind of a hip scene, a lot of bohemian type atmosphere here back in those days. It was really the old Greenwich Village.
Wow. And that was some of, I know, Jimmy's earliest gigs. Tell me about a formative Jimi Hendrix.
Yeah, he used to live in this neighborhood, and actually he almost lived across the street. And then an old friend of mine, Mike Quashie, used to live right on the corner here, and he was really good friends with Jimi Hendrix, and he wound up with a lot of Jimmy's memorabilia, a lot of his clothing and shoes and records and old guitar amps. And I remember carrying down an old twin reverb that belonged to Jimi Hendrix down about 5 flights of stairs. Almost pulled my shoulder out on that one. But yeah, Mike Quashie was a kind of very hip guy. He was called the Limbo King. He was back in the 1950s. He had some of the earliest rock clubs here in the city, and he would do the limbo. He was from Jamaica, I think, at the time, and really a nice guy, but he just passed away recently.
Oh, okay. What about the Jimmy shows that you got to see? What did it strike you at the time that there was something very special?
I can remember coming in. About 1964 or 5. I came in, and one day I was actually coming in to see the Mothers of Invention, and I had to wait until that show came on, and I went around the corner to the Cafe Wa. And that's Jimi Hendrix, and it was actually Jimmy James and the Flames back then.
Okay, yeah.
And he was playing guitar, and I just remembered his wrist was like rubber. He moved his hands so differently on the guitar and had these big fat fingers, and he just played like nothing I had ever heard before. I kind of got hooked on the guitar after seeing him play.
Fantastic! Wow, what a slice of history that would have been, catching him early on.
Yeah.
Now let's move on to your guitars a little more. In the film, you say Leo Fender got it right the first time, and of course you're talking about Telecaster, or I guess the Esquire. Can you explain what you mean by that?
Yeah, I think the earliest guitars that, electric guitars, were really a feeling out process. I don't think they would even had any idea that they would take off. In fact, they almost did fail until the Stratocaster came out in '54. The Telecaster was just an experiment, really. In fact, Leo was building amplifiers first, and most of the guitars at that time were semi-hollow body, hollow body actually, with F-holes, acoustic guitars that had pickups in them. And he was building amplifiers for that type of guitar. And when they had the idea of building a solid body, I'm sure he was influenced by Paul Bigsby and Rickenbacker brothers that built a solid body lap steel instrument. He was going to be building lap steel instruments, or already was. But the first guitar he made in the shape of the modern Telecaster was about 1948. And you can really see a lot of Paul Bigsby's influence in that guitar. And in fact, the legend goes that Leo had Paul's guitar with him for a couple of months before he came out with the Telecaster. But to me, it was just a brilliant design. It was George Fullerton designed body, and Leo's amplification and, neck scale and everything. They just sort of figured it all out, got it right the first time.
It's pretty amazing. I'm always knocked out, Rick, by how few changes there have been to the electric guitar since, I don't know, it seems like by '58, between Fender and Gibson, they'd sorted out all the big ideas, and we still cling to them today.
Yeah, no, it's true. I think that was like what I meant by Leo Fender getting it right the first time, because the Stratocaster was also a great guitar and still is, but the Jazzmaster and Jaguars and all the models that came afterward kind of almost came and went, even though the Jazzmaster and Jaguars are having a little resurgence now.
Yeah.
At the time, they just weren't as successful because there was just a little too many knobs and switches and gimmicks going on the guitars at that time. And I think the simplified sound is about as much as a guitarist can handle when he's on stage trying to remember what position, what pickup he's in. It's better if you only have one pickup. You don't have to worry. You can just concentrate on your playing. So guitarists have really generally gone back to simplification. It enables them to play the guitar more fluently, I believe.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you see someone like Bill Frisell, and I know he owns a bunch of guitars. I know he owns quite a few of yours, but there's that clip where he plays Surfer Girl in the film on just one of your one pickup Tele style guitars, and the range of tones is amazing. You don't miss the neck pickup. It's just a beautiful playing. So in the hands of a great player, that one pickup thing can really speak.
Yeah, it's like, Kirk Douglas in the movie actually says, what else do you need? Wood, pickup, strings, electricity, boom. I think that was one of the greatest lines in the movie.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's cool. And I like it how he's playing a guitar and then he very politely says, can I turn it up a little? Can you turn your amp up a little?
Yeah. I know, that's awesome. He's a great guy.
Very cool. Let's I want to talk about some of these guitarists a bit more in a moment, but if I can stay on the guitars for a while. So you love building Tele-style guitars, obviously. I did see a few guitars on the wall, though, kind of Strat, Super Strats. There were a few Floyd Rose guitars in the background. I think Jimmy Hintz starts off playing one of those, but moves to a more traditional. Yeah,
he was playing one of my Eagle guitars, and back in 1976, I wanted to celebrate the bicentennial year and wanted to make an Eagle-shaped guitar with our red, white, and blue stars and stripes paint job on it, and that was the first of an era of Eagle head guitars that I made that went all the way through into the 1980s, and then I went through that stage where, heavy metal and rock, heavy acid music was very popular. So I did a lot of those type of, modified Strat style guitars with open horns and 2-octave necks and, for the, Floyd Rose bridges and that tremolo stuff. And I still appreciate those guitars and I still love them, but I just don't make them anymore. Most of the people want my Telecaster style. I guess you just sort of develop a style, and that's become my style. But I'm okay with that.
Sure, sure. Tell me about your use of reclaimed wood. That's so interesting.
Yeah, the reclaimed wood is something that goes back to my days in college. Even when I first started building instruments, I was looking for inexpensive ways to buy materials to make them out of because I just didn't have money. So it's always been a kind of a fine used wood that you could, procure. And I always knew that old instruments sound better than new instruments, and that has always held true. So finding the old wood is something I've been doing for a very long time. But the New York City timber is very special stuff. It's a species of white pine, Pinus strobus, that grew throughout this area all the way up into New York State and the Adirondacks, and a lot of it was barged down into the city to build these old buildings, and that's why I call it the bones of old New York, because it's the framework of all these old 1800s buildings. And we have the largest depository of old growth timber in the world right here in New York City. So every building is just chock full of this wonderful wood that, is floor joists and roof rafters, and it's so old. It does have a beautiful patina on it, but it also has cracks and nail holes and nails that are still in there. You have to pull the nails out. So it's not the easiest wood to work with, but when you know what it is, you don't really want to go to a lumberyard and buy wood when this stuff's available for free. And as long as you're, inquisitive and you go looking for it. Every time I see a dumpster, we do a lot of dumpster diving, finding the wood, and we go to construction sites, and it's not as easy as it would be to go to a lumberyard, but it's well worth it. The sound of the wood is really different. It has a very warm, very resonant tone to the guitar. And of course, on a solid body electric, that's just as important as on an acoustic.
Now, on wood, you talk about the molecular structure and the changes that occur over time, and why the old wood is such a great tone wood for guitar. Can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, that's a difficult one to explain. I call it the mystery of the molecules, because we don't really know what causes that other than the vibrations that are put into the wood. I first started noticing it back when I started doing repairs on guitars, and I would see a lot of street musicians. Chris Whitley was a famous street musician that used to, frequently bring these really cheap guitars, but they sound amazing. And I was wondering why that could be. How could this guitar sound much better than an old Gibson that was never played? It was under somebody's bed and was in just like almost brand new condition. It's because it was never played that it loses its tone. The instruments have to be played for the vibrations to get into the wood, and it all happens on a molecular level. The vibrations affect it. They say that the guitar at the Met that belonged to Segovia, old Hauser classical, that is taken out, and the Philharmonic Orchestra people get to use it just to keep it alive. And the same with the Stradivarius and the Guarnerius violins. They let the people in the Philharmonic play them because they need to be played. They need to stay vibrating. And they say if you play what Segovia played on that guitar, it sounds beautiful. But if you tried to play folk music or something on it, it has a kind of a deadened tone. It doesn't respond, because that is the mystery of why that happens. It's all on that molecular level, and it's a beautiful thing, but it is impossible to explain, really.
Sure. I guess the other obvious wonderful part of using these woods is that there's such a story behind each guitar. Like you said, there's there's nail holes where they've been nailed to a wall or a floorboard or the rafters or something. I love it that each guitar has a story behind it before it was a guitar. I find that really fascinating, and a lot of guitarists, which I didn't understand in the beginning. I was worried that they would wonder about the knots and the cracks and the check marks in the wood and not be okay with that, but it's more than that. It's they call it character, and to me that was a surprise, but a welcome surprise that it was just, in their eyes, character. And they wanted a piece of a certain building. I wanted a piece of old New York,
And they wanted a piece of, say, Chumley's, the old speakeasy on Bedford Street, where the term "Your 86" comes from. That's 86 Bedford. I got wood out of there, and when I made a guitar for Bob Dylan, he definitely had his wood had to come from Chumley's because he would frequent the pub, and it's really neat to be able to give people a piece of old New York that is something that's memorable to them. Where they came out of a certain hotel they used to go to and during their honeymoon years or whatever, it's happened several times. I built guitars for a guitarist who grew up on Eldridge Street in the Lower East Side, way back when, and they were doing renovations. He pulled wood out of there, and and I built him a couple of guitars from that apartment building he lived in when he grew up. And the McSorley's guitar, the oldest bar in New York. I always wanted to make a guitar from that wood, and the New York Times had written an article about me and asked me, what building would you love to get wood from that you haven't? And I said, McSorley's would be great. The bartenders read the article and wound up giving me wood from there. So that's kind of the guitar we make in the film. Yeah, it's actually the McSorley's guitar. Yeah.
Wow, is that the one I think Charlie Sexton plays towards the end of the film?
Yes. Yeah, that's the McSorley guitar. Yeah.
Wow, that's so cool. That's amazing. I love that. There's It's funny talking about the pickups. I think he's the only guy in the whole film who uses the neck pickup on one of the guitars, and that sounds absolutely beautiful as well.
Oh yeah, his style of playing is awesome. It was really, really a pleasure to hear him play.
Nice. Now that's interesting because he plays for Dylan these days. He was a teenage pop rock sensation, and then as he's matured and grown, he's ended up with another one of your Kelly guitar owners. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, he's a big part of Bob's band, and I think that Bob was playing. He had a couple of my guitars. He had the Eagle Caster that he played all through about 2 or 3 years ago when he was on tour. He actually sent me pictures of him playing it in Beijing and in Hong Kong. But he's mostly on keyboards now. He's got a lot of arthritis problems and isn't playing much guitar anymore. But that was a real treat for me to catch it towards the end of his career and have him play one of your instruments. It's just nothing more special than that.
Yeah, fantastic. Can I ask you about Lou Reed? Of course, he sadly has passed away in recent years, so obviously didn't make it to your film. But tell me about working with him. Yeah,
Lou was kind of a curmudgeon of a guy. He was a little ornery sometimes, but I knew him from way back in the 70s when there used to be I had a shop on Downing Street, a little shop, and it was my first shop in New York City. And his guitar player at the time, Chuck, I think his name was living on Downing Street, and he told Lou that he found somebody that could work on his instrument. So that's how I got to know Lou in the early mid 70s, and then I guess he bought a guitar from me in about 1980 something. He had a couple of them then, and then towards the end of his career, his guitar tech at the time, Stuart Herwood, who's also in the film, he had one of my guitars, and Lou saw that. And then Lou was auditioning for a new guitarist, and Aaron Bajakum wound up in his band, and he had one of my guitars. So Lou got fascinated again by my guitars and wound up with 2 or 3 of the Bowery Pine guitars.
That's very cool.
Yeah, just a really nice guy. But like I say, he would stand out in front of the store and call me on the phone and ask if he could come in. And of course, the door's open, Lou. And then I realized he just wanted kind of to go in the back and not be in the front. Yeah, it was,
Wow. Because when I think of him, I think of his wife, Laurie Anderson, and they just seem such like the quintessential New York creative arts couple. So the fact that he was playing some of your guitars is very cool.
Yeah. Laurie and Stuart right now have been doing the drones where they take Lou's old guitars and get them in a circular situation with the amplifiers, and they start to feed back, and they become this kind of installation art exhibit sort of sound that happens, and they vibrate in unison. And actually, Stuart can get them to actually balance and stand up on their own just
Oh,
from the
wow.
vibrations feeding off each other. Yeah, it's
Wow.
fascinating how he's come to that area of his use of those same guitars. It's wonderful. Yeah, he just did something at St. John the Divine, one of the old famous cathedrals here in Manhattan, and he just did an exhibition up there, which was just amazing.
Brilliant. Tell me about working with Bill Frisell. You guys seem to have a relationship that goes back a while.
Yeah, Bill. Bill was and Mark Rebo were both friends of an old good buddy of mine, Robert Quine, who passed away about 10 years ago. And Bob was a regular here. He'd come here every day, and his wife had just passed away, and so he was pretty blue and lonesome, and would come by the shop just to get cheered up. And he was here all day, every day, just about for a long time. And that's how I got to know Bill and Mark through Bob. And they were old buddies, old guitar buddies. It's funny how they had a very kind of similar style of playing, the three of them, all very different from each other, but in a lot of ways similar. And I have one or two recordings they did up in Bob's loft, the three of them just jamming, which I would say are about as priceless as you can get any recording of the three of them playing together. But Bill's amazing. He found this guitar to be so resonant that sometimes he'll record with it without plugging it in. He actually puts little tiny microphones around the front of it,
That's
and
cool.
it just records with it acoustically. Yeah, this wood is so resonant that it creates its own tonal that way. And Bill's kind of a great experimenter with sound, and his use of the Memory Man is famous and renowned. But he's an incredible player. I love that. I love the idea that he plays my guitars every now and then.
Yeah, that's really cool. That's awesome. I should back up a little on the guitar construction. You're building everything by hand. There's a great shot of you shaping a neck with I think it's one of your grandfather's
with
tools.
Kirk.
Yeah, with Kirk. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a more traditional tool. That's why I love using my grandfather's tools, and I have some of my dad's tools, and I just love the idea that they're still being used, and they're just amazing. When you have old tools, it's like a lot of things that are old. They were just made so well, and the quality of the steel and the tool is so much better. It holds an edge so well that I can't see any reason not to use anything but that. It's just a great tool, and yeah, using the stuff by hand, you can really custom tailor an instrument to someone, and you can do things that you can't do with machines. There's a lot of instruments that are made with computer tooling nowadays, and that I try to definitely stay as far away as possible from. Everything is really done with hand tools and done in the old style. And I think, like I say, you can really tailor the instrument that way to someone's hand, their style of playing, and it's much more rewarding for me to do it that way.
Do you have any unusual requests when you're building a custom instrument?
Oh yeah, I mean over the years, especially back in the early days when I wasn't as known for a certain kind of guitar, I was building just about anything anybody wanted, and I've built guitars in the shapes of airplanes and all kinds of weird things. And people do come up with the craziest of ideas for sure. But they're out there, somewhere there's an instrument that's in the shape of an airplane and other things that I've done over the years that I kind of cringe when I look at them. But I had fun doing it. It was all, majoring in sculpture. That was something I did in school. And
Okay, yeah.
I still have an appreciation for that.
Oh, that's cool. There's another spot in the movie. I want to talk about Cindy as well. Cindy Hulej, your apprentice. She's flicking through this book of guitar pictures, and I thought it was hers. And she mentions being an art student, and I thought, okay, they're her pictures. But then she mentions it's like your notebook from the 70s of crazy guitar drawings.
Yeah, they did I had a lot of crazy ideas, and I still draw every day. But the stuff from the sketchbook, there's all kinds of designs in there that are more sculptural and less sculptural, and different, lots of different ideas. But I find drawing things gives you opens up the idea track in your brain. It keeps you going, coming up with new things, and as well as I'm more of a traditionalist. I've gotten known for the Telecaster, which is about as simple as you can get, but I have tried every other avenue of sculptural guitars and things over the years.
Yeah, that's cool. And it's cool that you still have those notebooks. That's such a great record of those ideas, yeah. Tell me about working with Cindy.
Yeah, Cindy's she came in here with a really great art background as well, and a real interest in learning to build. And it was something I always wanted to be able to pass on to someone. And in one day she just walked in and she asked me if she could learn to build guitars here. And she's been here now for more than 7 years, and she's got her own line of guitars. She picks up things really fast. She's got an eye for detail, and she's loves working with this wood as much as I do. And she's building very similar guitars. She likes the idea of very simplicity as well. And so we're both doing very similar stuff. But, she's got another side that she can also do, which she personalizes them for people if they have ideas for something that she does in a type of pyrography, which is a form of artwork that you would burn into the face of the instrument. So she's also gotten known for her pyrography work on the guitars. And she does leather work, and she combines leather and in the guitar as well. And she's got one called a pickpocket moto guard, which is like a motorcycle themed guitar with a leather face, and it has like beadwork around the edge, and it has a zipper on there for your picks, and it has a real kind of a punk look to it. It's really beautiful. By
pyrography, that's like the wood burning and etching that she's doing with flame and with heat. Yeah, some of that stuff's incredible. There's again from the film. There's that guitar with the Wilburys, the traveling Wilburys, etched into the bout, which is the lower bout, which is so cool.
Yeah, her portraiture is really exceptional. She can really catch the personality of the players, and each one of the guitars she's done the Yardbirds, and she's done the Who, and she's done the Rolling Stones, and every time she does one of you immediately know, even in the rough stage of it, that it's that person. She really does capture the personality of each player in the instrument and in her drawing. She's really good with the portraiture.
It's such a sweet movie. It's so moving. Rock star guitarists aside, and just having the relationship you have with Cindy, the friendship, and your mum works in the store. That's really cool. Yeah, she's going on 94 at the end of this week, and
oh wow, she's still trucking along good, and she does all the books here and keeps the place running, keeps it clean, and keeps me in line. Still my mom.
Really, that's beautiful. Well, happy birthday to your mum for this week. That's really cool.
Yes, I'll tell her.
What about hardware on your guitars? Like, you're obviously an incredible woodworker. Are you into creating hardware, or are you using off-the-shelf stuff?
Yeah, I love to use different materials. I've actually done a lot of metal work over the years too, and I like to fabricate my own pick guards and sometimes bridges, and I like using copper and types of materials that will work well with the pine, as it has that character in the wood. Sometimes I'll leave the patina in the wood, and then I'll use a copper guard and let that tarnish. And I like to use raw steel bridges, so they'll start to get a little rusty, and it just gives it a look like it's been around for 50 years. We're starting to see now guitars. Well, first, the Leo Fender guitars from the 1950s. If you see one of them now, or one that's been played all these years, it has this beautiful old played-in look to it. And guitarists love that. And that all started about in the 1980s, where they were doing what's called relicking on guitars to make them look like they were played in and look like they're 40 years old. And this guitar kind of do that naturally just by using this material, which is way older than that. It just has a feel about it that you've been playing it for 20 years when you get it. And it doesn't feel like a new guitar. It feels like a well-worn-in guitar. It's like an old pair of jeans. It just feels more comfortable.
Really cool. And it's amazing. Everyone who picks up a guitar in the film, these are people who are known to you, some of these guys, for a long time. They know your guitars well, but it's like they pick it up and they just like, oh, okay. They just get a look on their face. They just relax and go, yeah. It's like an old friend they've just picked up.
Yeah. Jamie Hinds in the film, it kind of has that feel when he was first playing one of my old '80s guitars, and it was sort of that skinny neck type of guitar that was popular then. And then he was telling me about his hand problem and his operations, and I said, well, you should try a guitar with a bigger neck, because that's sort of a fallacy that the guitar companies created, this rumor that skinny necks were faster, and they kept going after each other, making their necks skinnier and skinnier, and then guitarists wound up with tendonitis and carpal tunnel and other problems. We have a couple of guitarist hand surgeons here in Manhattan that their prescription for getting rid of your pain is to go to a bigger neck, and it actually really works. And now the most revered guitars you can buy are from the 50s and the war era, when the old Banner J45 Gibsons are the most sought after guitar, and it has a massive neck on it.
Yeah.
So the big neck thing is really makes the instrument sound a lot better, but it also is more comfortable to play. So it's become another signature of mine, is that the necks are very big. And I use also the thing I do different is I make them out of the same wood I make the bodies out of. So the necks are pine and the bodies are pine, and they just resonate like a different kind of instrument that you've never played before. So people are fascinated when they pick them up and they hear them. They definitely sound different. It's something they're not used to.
Wow, that's amazing. Yeah, when he picks up that big neck, again, the Telly style, it's like a revelation. That's so cool.
He wanted to run out the door with that guitar. He said, I think I'm going to steal this guitar. That's funny.
Oh, that's great. Hey, really interesting about pine as well, because we know a lot of the early Tellys were pine, but then that went out of fashion for a long time. But I guess pine being such a great construction wood means you've ended up with lots of pine, and that's not the only wood you use, of course, but people are realizing, even in recent years, wow, a pine guitar is actually such a resonant instrument.
Yeah, Leo actually made them out of pine, I believe, because he was already making amplifiers, like I was saying before. The first prototype and about the first 5 guitars were pine. But he had no intention of keeping pine as the instrument, because he wanted to use car colors. He wanted to use automotive paint and have a 57 T-Bird, baby blue and Daphne blue, and all those early Fender colors were actually old car colors. The Shoreline Gold was a Cadillac color. So a lot of those colors were very popular in the 1950s, and he wanted to sell his guitars with a high-gloss lacquer finish that almost looked like it was plastic. And they became more and more so as the years went by. They actually started using industrial finishes that were much thicker urethanes and catalyzed finishes that made them look like plastic. And I can remember in my early guitar stores, people would come in and say, is this made of plastic? They didn't realize that they were actually made of wood underneath that. And it just kills the sound when you have this big overcoat of lacquer and thickness of paint on the instrument. It doesn't let it vibrate. So by using a much more resonant wood in electric guitars, I guess a lot of people originally thought that the pickups in the guitar would be the predominant sound of the instrument, and it didn't need to be resonant. It didn't need to have acoustic properties. In a sense, that was true. They even made guitars out of lucite in the 1970s. But they were kind of dead sounding, and they sounded just like the pickups. They didn't sound like, you had to really rely on your pickups because they didn't have any tone. And then they started going, well, why does this old Fender sound better? It's from the 50s, and it had that old swamp ash wood that Leo loved. And so, the pine came back into fashion now, I think, because of me and a few other people who are using the more spruce-like and soundboard type woods in the solid bodies. And that really does make a big difference in sound, and it became popular again.
Rick, I need to let you go shortly. To finish up, though, did you ever think you'd be a film star in a documentary about your guitars?
Not in a million years. In fact, when Ron proposed this, and during the early filming, I was going like, why would anybody want to see a movie about me? I just didn't get it. But after seeing his creation, it's really more about the neighborhood and about the Greenwich Village and the changing scene, and of course about me and the shop and Cindy. But it's more than that. It's really a wonderful little film, and it's a really good guitar movie, which I guess there's very few really good guitar movies out there.
Yeah, true.
And so
true.
I think guitarists are going to, I keep telling Ron today, I said, this is going to be a cult film eventually. It'll be like Blank Generation, the old Bob Quine and the Voidoids movie. You know, those kind of movies become sort of cult films that you would dig up in an old shop, you know.
Yeah, that's brilliant. Well, I loved it so much. I saw someone got in touch with me and they sent me the trailer and they said, would you be interested in talking with Rick? And like the 2 minutes of the trailer was just so beautiful and so heartwarming. And I love guitars. I'll talk about guitars all day long, but just the story, like you said, the neighborhood, the human story about you and your shop. And I loved it so much. Then when I saw the full film, it was that times a million just to see the whole thing. So I'm glad you went along with Ron's idea, and congratulations on an amazing career. I often ask my guests what's coming up next for you, but you really answer the question in the film yourself when you say, you're just going to keep building these guitars.
That's it. That's what I do, and that's what I love doing. And it's not like work. It's coming here every day is fun. And
that's brilliant.
It's the best thing I could ever imagine. Yeah.
Fantastic. Rick, it's been lovely to meet you. Thank you so much for your time and all the very best.
All right.
Hope to drop in one day. You're on my bucket list now.
Oh, cool. Yeah, stop by. We're open every day. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Rick. Have a great day.
All right. You too. Bye-bye.
All right, there you go, my conversation with Rick Kelly. Now, the film is called Carmine Street Guitars, named after Rick's shop, and there are some links in our show notes for you to check out. I loved the film, and it was so cool to meet Rick. Hey, coming up on our show next week, we have Tal Wilkenfeld, incredible bass player. Can't wait to share that interview with you. And we also have t-shirts available now. Check those out on our website, guitarspeakpodcast.com. Also on the site, you can find out all the information about subscribing to the show and our social media contacts, all that kind of stuff. All right, then, that's it for this episode. Thank you so much for joining me. My name's Matt Wakeling, and you've been listening to the Guitar Speak podcast. I'll catch you next time. Bye now.